My name is Noah Davis. I'm 34 years old, and I've been living with my wife, Amelia Clark, for the past 5 years. Amelia is an architect, a talented and ambitious one. I work in finance, a senior analyst at a prestigious investment firm in downtown Chicago. From the outside, our lives looked perfect, the kind of perfect that makes people look at you and say, "Wow, you've got it all." Our friends often called us the golden couple. The house, the careers, the vacations, the laughter, it all seemed so effortless, so natural, and I believed it. We both did. But now, as I look back, I realize just how fragile the walls were that we had built around ourselves. We lived in a sleek, modern loft in the heart of Chicago, an open concept space with floor-to-ceiling windows, allowing the city's heartbeat to pulse through every room. From our balcony, you could see the lake in the distance, the constant motion of the city, the neon lights that bathed the streets in a warm glow as night fell. It was a perfect view, and our lives felt like that too. Perfect from the outside. We had a steady routine, dinners together, weekends spent with friends, and quiet nights at home. I never once doubted that this life, this routine, would be the one we would share forever. But sometimes the smallest things can change everything. Sometimes it's not the thunderclaps, the big dramatic moments that shake your world. It's the quiet things, the subtle shifts that you don't notice until it's too late. It was a Wednesday in mid-April, just a few days after the start of spring. The sun was already up, the birds were chirping outside, and the world was waking up around us. I woke up at 5:30 a.m. as I always did. Amelia was still asleep beside me, her arm draped over my chest. She always looked so peaceful when she was truly out, her mouth slightly open, her face relaxed in the way she had when she was happy. I kissed her forehead gently, slipping out of bed without disturbing her. I had started a morning running routine a couple of years ago. It was my time to clear my head, to gather my thoughts before the stress of work consumed me. That morning, I followed my usual route, down Willow Creek Trail, past Maple Ridge Elementary, and back. The air was crisp, but not cold, the kind of spring morning that makes you feel alive. The run always left me with a sense of peace and clarity, ready to take on whatever the day had in store. When I returned home, it was about 6:45 a.m. The front door was still locked, which wasn't unusual. Amelia wasn't expecting me back so early. I stepped inside quietly, not because I was sneaking around, but because it felt like the respectful thing to do. Amelia wasn't exactly a morning person. She loved her sleep, and I never minded letting her rest while I took care of the day's little details. I walked through the kitchen, grabbed a coffee mug, and filled it with the usual. As I moved toward the bedroom, I paused for a moment, just standing in the hallway, appreciating the silence. But then I heard something that stopped me dead in my tracks. It wasn't a noise, but a voice. Faint, muffled by the walls, but unmistakably hers. Amelia was talking to someone. At first, I thought it might have been a client, maybe a phone call, or even a conversation with her sister. But then I heard the words, "Last night was wild. I can still smell you." I froze. I didn't know what to do. Should I confront her? Should I pretend I hadn't heard anything? I stood there, suspended, my mind racing, but my body frozen. The words repeated in my head, and I felt a chill run down my spine. It wasn't just the words, it was how she said them. Soft. Almost shy. Like she was recalling a memory she didn't want to forget. I took a deep breath and made a decision right then. I wouldn't confront her just yet. I would play it cool. I would act like everything was fine, just as I always had. So I walked toward the bedroom, steadied my face, and pushed the door open like I was just returning from a morning jog. Amelia was sitting on the bed wearing a robe, her phone beside her on the nightstand. She looked up and smiled when she saw me, not a trace of guilt in her eyes. She didn't even flinch. "Hey," she said, brushing her hair behind her ear. "Back already?" I handed her the coffee. "Brought you your usual, almond milk, no sugar." She smiled and kissed me on the cheek. "You're the best." I hesitated for only a moment. "Who were you talking to?" Her face didn't even twitch. "Jenna," she replied casually, picking up the coffee and sipping it. "She's spiraling about her bachelorette party. Thinks the dresses we picked make her look like a piñata." I nodded, but inside something twisted. Jenna was supposed to be in Vermont at some kind of off-grid retreat with no reception. She had mentioned it just a few days ago, holding up her hand like she was making a vow. No screens, no phones, just nature. And now here she was, supposedly on the phone with Amelia, talking about her party. I didn't call her out on it. Not then. Amelia's phone sat there, face up on the nightstand. I noticed that the lock screen was empty. There were no call logs. She had cleared it. It was a small thing, but it was enough to make my stomach tighten. I smiled and said, "Tell her she's nuts. She'll look amazing no matter what." "I already did," Amelia said, walking toward the bathroom with her coffee in hand. "But you know how she is." I stood there alone for a moment, staring at the spot where her phone had been. And that was when I felt it. Something had shifted. The way the world had felt so solid and stable just moments before now felt off. There was a change, and I couldn't put my finger on it, but I knew something had been broken. I went into the guest bathroom and took a long, quiet shower. The warm water hit my skin, but I felt cold. I replayed the moment in my head, over and over again. Her voice, the way she had spoken, the lie she had delivered so smoothly. I couldn't shake it. Something had changed. The trust I had with Amelia, the one that I thought was unbreakable, was starting to unravel. The rest of the day seemed to drag on in slow motion, each minute heavier than the last. I went through the motions of a normal day, work, emails, calls, but my mind was consumed by that one conversation, the way Amelia had spoken, the softness in her voice, the words she had chosen so carefully. My heart raced, but I didn't let it show. I couldn't, not yet. I needed more answers before confronting her. I couldn't make accusations without knowing the truth. By the time I returned home that evening, I was exhausted, not physically, but mentally. My mind was on overdrive, replaying every second of that morning, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Amelia was in the kitchen, preparing dinner as usual, humming a tune under her breath. She greeted me with a warm smile, but something in her eyes seemed distant. I couldn't pinpoint what it was, but I felt it. I walked over, kissed her on the cheek, and we exchanged pleasantries like everything was fine. I sat down at the kitchen island, absent-mindedly scrolling through my phone while she finished preparing our meal. But even then, I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in my gut. The conversation earlier, the things I'd noticed over the past few weeks, they all started to pile up. Amelia was changing, slowly, imperceptibly, but I could see it now. She wasn't the woman I thought she was. She wasn't the woman I had fallen in love with. It wasn't the small acts of kindness she used to do. Those were still there, bringing me coffee, cooking dinner, but there was something more. A hidden agenda, a deliberate attempt to create a facade. I had never been one to doubt her. We had built a life together, and that life felt solid. But now everything felt fragile. The trust I had once placed in her was slipping away, replaced by suspicion. I couldn't stop thinking about the bracelet. It was a small silver cuff that I hadn't seen before. I had noticed it the night she was doing dishes, sleeves pushed up, and the bracelet peeking out from underneath her wrist. I hadn't asked about it, but I made a mental note to keep an eye on it. When I asked her the next day, she told me it was a gift from Clara, a college friend she hadn't spoken to in over a year. The timing of it, the way she said it, felt off, but I let it slide, convinced I was just being paranoid. But then there were the small, subtle details. The way she started leaving her engagement ring on the bathroom counter. It happened so frequently that it became hard to ignore. Amelia had always worn that ring like it was part of her, something that couldn't be separated from her identity. But now, it was as if she was deliberately removing it. And then, there was her phone. She used to leave it on the counter or bedside table, no issues. But lately, she'd started hiding it. Whenever I entered a room and she had it open, she'd quickly shut it like she was hiding something. It made my skin crawl, but I didn't say anything. Not yet. On the surface, everything seemed fine. We were still eating dinner together, still spending time with friends, still living the life we had built. But beneath the surface, there was a growing tension. I felt it, and I'm sure she did too, though she was better at pretending than I was. I couldn't stop myself from observing her every move, collecting data like a detective piecing together a puzzle. A few days later, I received an unexpected email from my bank. There were unusual transactions in our joint account, payments to a person I didn't recognize. The name Chris Urston appeared multiple times. Each transaction had a vague description: "Thanks again," "perfect weekend," and one labeled simply "room." I didn't know a Chris Arston, but I needed to know who he was. I spent the next couple of days tracking down any trace of this person. I searched through Amelia's emails, text messages, and social media accounts, but everything was scrubbed clean. I had never known Amelia to be so secretive. It was as if she was trying to erase all evidence of something, but I wasn't ready to confront her yet. I couldn't just accuse her based on vague transactions and suspicious behavior. I needed proof. The next morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I installed a tracking app on Amelia's phone, not maliciously, but out of necessity. I needed to know the truth, and I was willing to go to extreme lengths to find it. I didn't plan on using it unless I had a solid reason, but now I had more than enough reasons. And that's when everything changed. I began watching her movements. Every time she left the house, I checked the app. I knew where she was going, who she was meeting, and I started to piece it all together. One Friday evening, she mentioned she was going to stay at Jenna's place for the weekend. "Jenna's birthday weekend," she said. She had mentioned it earlier in the week, and I nodded along, but I wasn't fooled. That night, I opened the tracking app and watched as her car drove across town. Not toward Jenna's place, but toward a hotel on the edge of the city, the Amberleaf Hotel. My stomach dropped. It wasn't a business trip. It wasn't Jenna. It was him. I didn't know who he was, but I was about to find out. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed the ring box I had kept hidden in the safe for months, the ring I had planned to propose to her with. I got dressed, calm and collected, and made my way to the Amberleaf Hotel. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was methodical, focused. I wasn't going to confront her. I wasn't going to make a scene. I just needed to see the truth for myself. When I arrived, I sat at the bar, keeping a close eye on the elevator. After a while, I saw them. Amelia and a man I didn't recognize, standing together, laughing. He was tall, muscular, and wore a confident smirk. He wasn't the type of guy I would ever expect her to be with, but there he was, holding her hand. I signaled to the bartender, slipped him a $50, and handed him the ring box. "When she comes out, give this to her," I said, my voice steady. "Tell her it's from Tyler." I watched Amelia's face as she received the box, her smile faltering the moment she saw what was inside. The color drained from her face, and I could see the panic start to set in. The man beside her looked confused, asking who I was, but Amelia's eyes found mine, and for a moment, there was nothing but silence between us. She started toward me, her heels clicking against the floor, but I didn't move. I didn't say anything. I just walked past her, my heart pounding in my chest, my mind racing. "Tyler, wait!" she called out, but I didn't stop. I didn't even look back. I walked out of the bar and into the night. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel satisfaction. I just felt cold. This was the moment everything had been leading to, the moment I knew the truth. As the days went by, I found myself in a state of constant unease, like walking on shifting sand. I couldn't shake the feeling that Amelia was slipping away from me, but I couldn't put my finger on why or how. On the surface, everything appeared normal. We still spent time together. We still had dinner, went for walks, and talked about our future. But I noticed the subtle shifts. The things she used to do without thinking, like leaving her phone around or wearing her engagement ring at all times, started changing. The more I tried to ignore it, the more these little things began to add up. I couldn't help myself. I began observing her like a detective, collecting evidence of a crime I wasn't ready to confront yet. It wasn't just about the ring anymore. It wasn't just about the calls that I'd overheard. I began noticing the strange behavior. She was hiding things, keeping me at arm's length when she never had before. She started texting more frequently, but always in private. Her phone was always face down now, something she had never done before. It was as if she was trying to create a wall between us, but it was a wall I couldn't break through. I knew the signs. As a man who spent his days working with numbers, data, and logic, I had always been able to trust my instincts when something didn't feel right. And now, every part of me was screaming that something was off. But I wasn't ready to make a move just yet. I had to make sure I wasn't overreacting. I needed to know the truth, not just assume the worst. One morning, a week after the first unsettling event, I came home from a meeting earlier than expected. I opened the front door, greeted by silence. The house was eerily still. The kitchen, which had once been filled with laughter and casual conversation, was quiet. I looked around, expecting to find Amelia in the living room or her office, but there was no sign of her. Then I heard it again, just like the first time. Her voice, muffled, but unmistakably hers. I froze in the hallway, listening intently. She was on the phone again, speaking softly, but this time I heard more than just the casual banter I'd expected. "It was just supposed to be a few drinks," she said, a soft laugh escaping her lips. "But I couldn't resist. I wanted to be with you." "It's not like I don't think about you. I think about you all the time. I don't know how to explain it." My heart stopped. It was the same voice. The same tone of affection, but this time it wasn't directed at me. It wasn't about the house or our future or anything I'd ever heard her say to me. This was different. This was something else entirely. And once again, I found myself frozen in place, listening to her words as they tore through my mind like a knife. She was having an affair. I knew it now. The evidence was undeniable, the voice so clear in its affection, but I had to be sure. I couldn't go off a feeling, no matter how strong. The next day, when I returned home, I didn't confront her. I didn't mention the phone call, the voice, the words. I pretended everything was normal, just as I had when I'd first overheard her talking. But every time I looked at her, the doubt gnawed at me. It was like I was seeing her through a new lens, one that had turned everything she said and did into a puzzle that I couldn't solve. I decided I needed to investigate further. I started paying more attention to her schedule, the times she left the house and returned. It was hard to ignore the patterns that began to form. Sundays became the most suspicious day of the week. She started leaving for yoga at 9 a.m. as usual, but now she wouldn't return until well into the afternoon. The excuse was always the same. Traffic was crazy. I stopped for a smoothie. But I had grown up in this town. I knew the area, and I knew how traffic worked. There was no reason it should take hours to get home from yoga class, not on a Sunday morning. Then one day, I decided to follow her. I wasn't proud of it, but I needed to know. I had to see for myself where she was going, who she was seeing. As expected, she drove out of the neighborhood, not toward the yoga studio, but toward a part of town I hadn't seen her visit in months. I followed her from a distance, careful not to draw attention to myself. She parked outside a luxury hotel, a place I recognized immediately, the Amberleaf Hotel. My heart sank. This was no yoga class. This was no smoothie run. This was something entirely different, something that didn't belong in the life we had built together. I parked my car across the street, hidden from view, and waited. I watched as she got out of the car, dressed in a tight red dress I had never seen before. She was laughing, holding hands with a man I didn't know, but whose face I would soon recognize as the one who had been texting her for weeks. It was then that I realized I wasn't just watching my fiancée walk into a hotel with another man. I was watching my world fall apart. I knew in that moment that this wasn't something I could ignore anymore. This was it. The truth was staring me in the face, and I couldn't unsee it. I had to act. As the days turned into weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. It wasn't the kind of anger that came quickly or explosively. No, this was a slow burn, a smoldering realization that burned through every fiber of my being. Amelia, the woman I had planned my life with, the one I had envisioned as my partner forever, was slipping away right in front of me. She wasn't just distant physically, she was emotionally detached as well, and I was left to pick up the pieces. I kept up the act, the one where everything was normal for the sake of appearances, but my mind raced constantly. I noticed every detail, the way she started spending longer hours away from home, the odd texts she received, the changes in her routine, the subtle withdrawal of affection. At first, I thought it was just a phase, something maybe work or life had thrown at her, but I quickly realized it wasn't. She was making a conscious effort to pull away, and the realization hit harder than any confrontation could have. One evening, after she came back late from what she called a work meeting, I had a moment to myself. She had kissed me on the cheek, just as she always did, but the kiss felt empty. There was no warmth, no connection. She was just going through the motions, and I could see it in her eyes. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the cup of coffee she had left behind on the counter, her lipstick smudge on the rim. The small things that had once felt like symbols of love now seemed like painful reminders of the distance between us. But that evening, I finally made up my mind. I couldn't wait any longer for her to come clean. The affair was no longer a suspicion. It was a truth I had known deep down for weeks, a truth I had gathered from all the small inconsistencies and evasions. The next step was clear. I had to confront her, but I wasn't going to do it in the way I had imagined. I wasn't going to yell or demand answers. I wasn't going to let my emotions cloud the clarity I needed. I needed her to understand the weight of what she had done. I needed to show her that I wasn't afraid to walk away, that I wasn't going to let her play me for a fool any longer. So I waited for her to come home, and when she did, I greeted her with a calm smile, a voice that didn't betray the whirlwind of emotions raging inside me. "Amelia," I said as she walked through the door, the usual tired look on her face after a long day. "We need to talk." She raised an eyebrow, but there was no fear in her eyes, no guilt. It was like she already knew this was coming. She had always been a master of deflection, a woman who could smile and lie with ease. But tonight, she couldn't hide behind that facade. She sat down across from me, her posture defensive but trying to appear casual. "What about?" she asked, her voice softer than usual. I could tell she was hoping for an out, a way to avoid the inevitable conversation that was about to unfold. I took a deep breath and then, without any further preamble, I said, "I know about Chris." Her eyes flickered for just a fraction of a second, but it was enough. It was enough to confirm everything I needed to know. She opened her mouth to speak, but I stopped her with a raised hand. "I've seen the texts, Amelia. I know what you've been doing." I let the words hang in the air for a moment, watching as her expression shifted from one of calm to one of panic. "I can explain, Tyler," she began, her voice trembling now. "It's not what you think." I shook my head, cutting her off. "It's exactly what I think. You've been lying to me, and I've been too blind to see it. I've been living in this fantasy, thinking that everything was fine when it was already falling apart." I stood up, my heart pounding, but I didn't let the anger take over. "I'm done, Amelia. I can't do this anymore." "You've already made your choice." She stood up too, now visibly shaken, but I could see the guilt starting to creep into her face. "Please, Tyler, don't do this. You're the one I want," she said, reaching for me. I stepped back, not wanting to be touched by her. "No, you're not. Not anymore." It was painful to say those words, but it was the truth. And deep down, I knew it was the only thing left for me to do. I had to cut ties, even if it meant losing everything we had built. Her eyes filled with tears, and I could feel the weight of her regret. But I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. "I've already made arrangements," I said coldly. "You'll get your things, and I'll move on." "We're done." Amelia stood there, her face pale, her body trembling, but I didn't flinch. "You can't just throw away everything like this," she cried. I walked to the door, opened it, and turned back to her one last time. The days that followed were filled with a sort of numbness. I didn't feel relief, nor did I feel the satisfaction of knowing the truth. What I felt was the weight of finality. It was like standing on the edge of something deep and dark, knowing that the decision had been made and there was no turning back. I had confronted Amelia, and now I had to deal with the consequences. The house felt emptier than before, as if her absence had already been carved out, leaving nothing but the hollow sounds of my own footsteps. It wasn't the kind of silence I was used to, the quiet of a peaceful evening, of contentment. It was a dead silence, one that gnawed at the edges of my thoughts and left me unable to concentrate on anything. I stayed in that silence for days, only going through the motions. At work, I was a shell of my usual self, numb to the demands of clients, to the spreadsheets that once filled me with a sense of accomplishment. My mind was no longer on investments or portfolios, it was on the hole in my chest where trust used to be. One night, as I sat in my study, staring at the empty desk in front of me, I heard a soft knock on the door. It was Maria, my assistant. She stepped inside, her eyes careful but knowing. "Tyler," she began, her voice soft, "I heard from your lawyer. The paperwork's ready. You just have to sign it." I didn't look up. I didn't need to see it to know what it was. I had already made my decision. I had already walked away from her, and now all that was left was the legalities. "Set it up," I said quietly, my voice distant, detached. "I'll sign it tomorrow." She nodded and left, leaving me alone again with my thoughts. I closed my eyes and tried to remember the good times, the times when it was easy to love her, when everything felt right. But the more I tried to remember, the more it felt like I was clinging to a memory that no longer existed. The next day, I met with the lawyer. The conversation was clinical, professional. We discussed the distribution of assets, the separation of our finances, and the custody of the house. It was as if I were signing away a chapter of my life that I had no control over, watching it slip away with each stroke of the pen. But the hardest part was yet to come. The hardest part was facing Amelia. She called me that afternoon, her voice hesitant, unsure. "Tyler, I know you're angry with me," she said, her words soft, as if she were trying to coax me into forgiveness. "But I want to talk. I want to explain." I had no desire to listen. What was there to explain? The lies, the deceit, the betrayal, it was all there, already in my mind, painted in broad strokes that couldn't be covered up with empty words. "I don't want to hear it, Amelia," I said, my voice hardening. "You've already made your choices. It's too late for explanations." There was a long pause, and then she spoke again, quieter this time. "I didn't want to hurt you, Tyler." "I swear I didn't. It just happened." Her voice cracked at the end, and for a moment, I almost believed her. Almost. But then I remembered the lies, the missed calls, the empty promises. No, it hadn't just happened. She had made it happen. "I can't do this anymore," I said, my voice breaking despite myself. "I can't keep pretending that everything is fine. You've broken my trust, and that's something I can never get back." There was a choked sob on the other end of the line, and I felt a pang in my chest. But I didn't let it sway me. I had been strong enough to leave, strong enough to take control of my own life again. I wouldn't let her manipulate me into staying for the wrong reasons. "I'll send someone to pick up your things," I said coldly. "I'm done. I'm done with this. With us." And with that, I hung up the phone. After everything had fallen apart, I spent the next few days trying to pick up the pieces of my life. I thought I was strong enough to move on. I thought that signing the papers, confronting Amelia, and letting go would be the end of it, that I would somehow feel a sense of closure. But what I hadn't prepared for was the deep, lingering ache that comes with severing a bond that had once felt unbreakable. The first few nights were the hardest. The silence in the house seemed to swallow me whole. I could still smell her perfume in the bedroom, still see the small signs of her presence, the lipstick she'd left on the bathroom counter, the towel draped over the chair after her shower. It was as if everything she touched still clung to the air, refusing to let me forget the life I'd lost. I went through the motions of work, pretending that everything was fine, but inside I was a mess. The business meetings, the calls, the numbers, they all seemed so trivial now. I was drowning in my own thoughts, unable to escape the image of her, the sound of her voice, the memory of the way she looked at me before everything changed. It wasn't until that Friday that things truly began to unravel. I had been so focused on my work that I almost forgot about the plans I had with my old friend Marcus. He had invited me out for drinks at one of the local bars, a place we used to frequent when we were in college. It was supposed to be a distraction, a way to keep my mind off everything. But when I stepped into the bar, I realized just how much I had underestimated how much the past few weeks had affected me. As soon as I walked in, I saw Marcus at the far end of the bar sitting with a group of people. His face lit up when he saw me and he waved me over. I forced a smile, making my way through the crowd. We exchanged pleasantries, but my mind was elsewhere. I couldn't help but feel like the weight of everything was still on my shoulders, pressing down on me with each passing moment. "Tyler, you look like hell," Marcus said with a laugh as he clapped me on the back. "Come on, let's grab a drink. You need it." I nodded, appreciating the gesture, but the truth was, I didn't know what I needed anymore. I wasn't sure if I was ready to face reality or if I just wanted to keep pretending that everything was okay. We ordered our drinks, and for a while the conversation stayed light. But as the night wore on, I found myself growing more and more distant. My eyes kept drifting to the door, to the crowd of people coming in and out, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I wasn't just in a bar with friends. I was sitting there, alone, surrounded by reminders of the life I thought I would have, the life I had lost. It wasn't until late into the night, when the crowd began to thin out, that I noticed her. She walked in with another man, Amelia. I didn't know why she was there or what she was doing, but the sight of her made my heart stop. She was laughing, her head tilted back as she spoke to the man beside her. Her eyes sparkled with excitement, and she was wearing that same crimson dress that I had seen her in the night I had confronted her. The same dress that made me feel like I was seeing her for the first time. The same dress that had once been something we had shared together. Now it was a symbol of everything she had taken from me. I couldn't tear my eyes away. I watched her as she walked through the bar, oblivious to my presence, her hand in his. I felt something cold tighten in my chest. It was a physical sensation, something heavy, something suffocating. I wanted to turn away, to look anywhere but at her, but I couldn't. I couldn't escape the truth that was staring me in the face. I sat there, frozen in place, as I watched them make their way to the bar. They were laughing together now, their heads bent close as they whispered to each other. And then I saw it, the ring on her finger. The engagement ring I had given her, the one she had worn for years, was now sitting in the palm of her hand, like she was casually tossing it away. In that moment, I realized that it wasn't just her betrayal that hurt. It was the fact that I had been nothing more than an afterthought to her. The man she was with didn't know me, didn't know anything about the life we had built. Yet somehow, he was enough to make her forget all of it. He was enough to take away everything I thought was ours. I wanted to confront her, to march up to her and ask her how she could do this to me, to our life together. But something stopped me. Something inside me told me to stay put, to watch, to observe. As I sat there still, the weight of the realization began to settle in. The woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted, had thrown it all away. And now there was nothing left but the mess she had made, a mess that I was now left to clean up. I didn't go to her. I didn't speak to her. I didn't call her out. I just watched her. I watched her and the man who had replaced me, and I realized that the life I had known was gone. It was no longer a part of me, no longer something I could hold on to. As I sat there, nursing the last dregs of my whiskey, my thoughts continued to spiral. The bar was lively, people laughing and chatting, their voices blending together in the background like a distant hum. But to me, it felt like everything had gone silent. The noise of the world seemed to vanish, replaced by the relentless echo of Elena's words, the softness of her voice when she spoke to him, the tenderness in her tone, the way she had said, "Last night was wild, I can still smell you," haunted me. It was more than just the words. It was the way she said them, almost shy, almost as if she were remembering something that had meant more to her than anything I could provide. I had always prided myself on knowing her better than anyone else, understanding her in ways others couldn't. But this was something new. Something I couldn't recognize. It was a part of her that had been hidden from me, a part I wasn't meant to see. I felt the pit of my stomach drop, and suddenly the world around me seemed much smaller, as if it was closing in on me. The life I thought I knew, the life I thought we shared, was beginning to unravel in front of me. I had always believed that I could trust her, that trust was the foundation of everything we had built. But now, all of that was being questioned. crumbling away piece by piece. I stood up from the table, the noise of the bar still muffled in my ears, and I stepped outside into the cool night air. The city lights flickered in the distance, but they didn't offer any comfort. The cold, crisp air felt sharp against my skin, a harsh reminder that everything had changed. I walked aimlessly down the sidewalk, my mind racing, replaying every moment, every conversation, every laugh, every touch. Had I missed the signs? Had I been blind to what was happening right under my nose? The thought that Elena had been hiding something from me for so long gnawed at me, each piece of information I gathered making the puzzle clearer but also more painful. I had been so sure of everything, of us. I had built my life around the assumption that Elena and I were a team, partners in everything. And now, here I was, standing alone in the middle of a city that felt more foreign to me than ever before. The weight of the betrayal was suffocating, but I couldn't let it break me. I stopped walking and sat on a nearby bench, staring at the empty street ahead of me. I couldn't remember the last time I had felt so lost. There was no anger in me, not yet. There was just an overwhelming sense of confusion, of hurt. How had we gotten here? How had everything we built together crumbled so suddenly, so silently? But even in that moment of despair, I felt something else, something I hadn't expected: clarity. I realized that this wasn't the end. It couldn't be. I wasn't going to let it be the end. Elena might have taken a different path, but that didn't mean I had to follow her. This was my life, my story, and I was the one who was still in control. I stood up from the bench, my feet moving steadily, almost automatically toward my car. The decision I had made to confront this situation, to not turn away or pretend like I didn't know what was happening, had already started to reshape everything. I wasn't going to stay stuck in the past, paralyzed by the hurt. I had to move forward, and in that moment, I knew I had a choice. I could let Elena's actions define me, or I could take control and write my own future. The drive back home was quiet, the city lights blurring in my rearview mirror. I wasn't looking for closure, at least not the kind I thought I would get. I didn't want apologies, I didn't want explanations. I just wanted to move on. When I reached the house, everything felt different. The front door that had always been a symbol of home now felt like the entrance to a life I no longer recognized. But still, I stepped inside, letting the door close softly behind me. The house was eerily quiet. Elena wasn't home yet, and the silence felt heavy. I walked through the empty rooms, feeling like an intruder in a place that used to be mine. I found myself in the living room, staring at the framed photo of us on the mantel. It was from a trip we had taken to Tahoe years ago. We were so happy back then, so in love. I picked up the frame, holding it for a moment before I turned it over, placing it face down on the table. It was as if I was acknowledging the end of something, the finality of what had been. I sat on the couch, running my fingers through my hair, trying to make sense of everything. The weight of the situation was starting to sink in. Elena hadn't just betrayed me, she had betrayed the life we had built together. She had chosen someone else, someone who wasn't even a part of our world, and I was left to pick up the pieces. But even in that moment of pain, I realized something else. I had a life to rebuild. I had my own future to forge, and I wasn't going to waste it waiting around for answers that would never come. The life I had with Elena was gone, but that didn't mean I had to stop living. The next morning, when I woke up, I felt different. The anger I had been holding on to the night before had faded, replaced by something else: determination. I wasn't going to let Elena's choices dictate the course of my life. I wasn't going to stay trapped in a cycle of regret and hurt. I was going to take control, and I was going to start over. As I went through the motions of getting dressed and preparing for the day, I couldn't help but feel like this was the moment I had been waiting for. I had the chance to rebuild, to start fresh, and I wasn't going to let it slip away. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was mine to navigate. I grabbed my keys and headed out the door, stepping into a world that felt both unfamiliar and full of possibility. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I was excited to find out. The following days passed by in a blur of routine. I would wake up, go through the motions of my workday, make small talk with colleagues, all while a nagging feeling tugged at the back of my mind. Everything felt like it had been set into motion, yet I was still waiting for something, some sign that this moment in my life was real, that it wasn't just a chapter in a book I couldn't escape. That's how it felt for the next few days, like I was merely living in the aftermath, the echo of my life ringing louder in my ears with each passing second. I found myself asking, is this it? The quiet emptiness, the absence of Elena's presence in our shared spaces, made the house feel colder, more distant. It was the kind of emptiness that never quite settled, always lingering just beyond my reach. It wasn't the kind of solitude that brought peace. It was the kind of solitude that reminded you of what was lost. I had already packed up her things, storing them neatly in boxes as if preparing for her departure, but part of me didn't want to believe she was really gone. I still expected her to walk through the door, to return to the life we had built together, but as the days passed, reality settled in. I realized that she was never coming back. The life I thought we had was gone, and with it, the future I had envisioned. And yet, something had shifted in me. I wasn't as broken as I thought I'd be. The pain was there, but it was bearable now. I had learned to live with it. One evening, as I sat in the living room going through some work emails, I heard the sound of footsteps on the porch. I froze, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. I knew exactly who it was before I even turned around. Elena. She was standing at the front door, her expression unreadable, her eyes scanning the house like she didn't quite recognize it anymore. For a moment, neither of us said anything. She was the first to break the silence. "Tyler, we need to talk." Her voice was hesitant, soft. It was the same voice that used to comfort me, the voice that would whisper sweet nothings into my ear late at night when we were wrapped up in each other. But now it sounded foreign, distant. I stood up slowly, walking towards her. My heart was pounding in my chest, but my face remained neutral. I wasn't sure what I expected. Maybe an apology, maybe an explanation, maybe just a way to make sense of all this. But I knew deep down that whatever she said wouldn't fix anything. It wouldn't change the fact that she had broken my trust, that she had taken something precious from me. "Why now?" I asked, my voice steady. "What do you want, Elena?" She took a deep breath before answering, her eyes avoiding mine. "I don't know. I just, I thought I needed time to think, to figure things out." I felt a wave of frustration rise within me. Time had been all she had, all I had given her to make a choice. And yet here we were, in this space where no words could bridge the gap between us. "You had your time," I said, my voice tight. "You've had weeks, months. You made your choice when you crossed that line." She flinched, but quickly masked the reaction with a forced smile. "I never meant for it to happen this way, Tyler." "I swear." But the words meant nothing now. I could hear the sincerity in her voice, but it was drowned out by everything that had already transpired. The lies, the secrecy, the way she had tried to cover her tracks. It was all there, plain as day. I took a step back, crossing my arms over my chest. "You think you can just walk back in here and act like everything's fine? Like we can just pick up where we left off?" Her eyes flickered with something, maybe regret, maybe fear. But I wasn't about to give her the benefit of the doubt anymore, not after everything she had done. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I did, and I don't know how to fix it." I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "You can't fix it, Elena. It's done." I wanted to say more. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to make her feel the weight of what she had done, but I didn't. Instead, I stood there in silence, letting the moment stretch on. It was a moment that felt like an eternity. "I think you should go," I said finally, my voice calm but firm. "This isn't working anymore." Her face fell, and I could see the hurt in her eyes, the desperation. But it didn't matter. I wasn't going to let her back in, not this time. She didn't argue. She didn't beg. She simply nodded and turned to leave, the soft click of the door behind her, the last sound I would hear of her for a long time. As I stood there, listening to the silence that followed, I felt something shift within me. It was as if the weight that had been bearing down on me for so long had finally lifted. The hurt, the confusion, the anger, all of it was still there. But now there was something else too: clarity. I didn't need her anymore. I didn't need to chase after the pieces of a life that was never going to fit together again. I had to focus on myself now. I had to rebuild, to find my own path, and in that moment, I realized that this wasn't just the end. It was the beginning of something new, something I had control over. And as the door closed behind her, I knew I would be okay. After Elena left, I felt like I was in some sort of limbo, trapped between a life I had once believed in and the harsh reality of its dissolution. The house was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that feels heavy, almost suffocating. There were no more voices, no more shared jokes, no more moments of comfort that had once filled the spaces between us. Instead, everything felt hollow. Her absence echoed through every corner of the house, as though her presence had left an indelible mark on the very fabric of our home. I found myself waking up every morning expecting to see her beside me, only to be greeted by the cold emptiness of an unmade bed. It was hard to adjust to this new normal. There were moments when the weight of the silence was too much to bear, when I wanted to scream or cry, to let it all out. But instead, I just sat in the quiet, letting it wash over me. I had never realized how much I had relied on her, how much I had woven my life around the comfort of her presence. Now, with her gone, I was left to confront the painful truth. I had built my entire life around someone who had never really been there for me in the way I thought. I had trusted her, loved her, believed in us. And yet, she had left me for someone else, someone I didn't even know. As the days went on, I tried to keep busy. Work became my refuge, a distraction from the pain. But no matter how much I immersed myself in reports and meetings, there were always moments when I would catch myself thinking about her. I would think about the little things: the way she used to hum while making breakfast, the way she would smile when I brought her coffee in the mornings, how we would sit together on the couch and watch TV for hours without saying much but feeling so connected. All of those memories seemed like they belonged to someone else now, like they were part of a life that no longer existed. It was strange how quickly everything shifted. Just a few weeks ago, I had thought I had everything figured out. I had a job that I was proud of, a partner I planned to marry, and a future that seemed certain. But now, I was left wondering what was real and what had been a facade all along. Elena had been the center of my world, and now, without her, I was lost. The person I thought I knew, the person I had spent years with, had been replaced by someone I barely recognized. It was a brutal reality to face. One evening, after another day of going through the motions, I found myself sitting in the living room. I hadn't been able to move the furniture yet. Her presence still lingered there. The couch where we had spent so many nights together, the table where we had shared so many meals. It was as if the house was holding on to the remnants of our life. I stared at the framed photo on the wall of us on our trip to Tahoe, one of the few photos we had taken together on vacation. We looked happy in it. There was no sign of the betrayal that was to come, no hint that our love had been quietly eroding in the background. I stood up, the room suddenly feeling too small for me, too full of memories. I walked over to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of whiskey, and sat at the counter. My mind raced, trying to make sense of everything, but there was no sense to be found. I kept thinking about the lies she had told me, the way she had looked at me when I confronted her about the phone call. She hadn't even tried to defend herself. She hadn't even tried to explain. Instead, she had simply smiled, that same smile that used to make me feel safe, like everything would be okay. But now, it felt like a mask, a facade she had perfected over the years. The next morning, I woke up early, just like every other day. But this time, it felt different. There was a sense of finality in the air, as though the past few weeks had all been leading up to this moment. I had been running from the truth for so long, pretending like everything was fine, trying to hold on to a relationship that had already crumbled. But now, I couldn't ignore it any longer. The truth was here, staring me in the face. Elena had made her choice, and it was time for me to make mine. I got dressed, grabbed my keys, and walked out the door. It wasn't just about confronting Elena anymore. It was about confronting myself. I had spent so much time holding on to a version of my life that wasn't real, that I had lost sight of who I was. It was time to take control, to reclaim my life. I wasn't going to sit around and wait for her to come back, for her to apologize or explain. I had already given her everything I had. Now it was time for me to give something to myself, a future that didn't include her. I drove to work in a daze, my thoughts consumed by everything that had happened. I couldn't help but think about how much had changed in such a short period of time. Just a few months ago, I had been planning our wedding, envisioning a future with her by my side. But now, all of that seemed so far away, like it belonged to someone else's life, not mine. As I sat in my office going through the motions of another day, I realized something. This wasn't just about the betrayal anymore. It was about me. It was about finding who I was outside of this relationship, outside of Elena. I had spent so much time defining myself by what we had together, by the life we built, that I had lost touch with the person I used to be. I needed to find myself again. And that process started now? The weeks after Elena's departure felt like walking through a fog. There were moments when the world around me seemed impossibly clear, like the sun was shining, and everything had the potential to be good again. But just as often, I felt completely adrift. Every room in the house I had once shared with her felt foreign. There was a strange sense of disconnection, not just from the space itself, but from my own self. I had been so wrapped up in building a life with Elena, in believing that we were heading in the same direction, that I had completely forgotten about who I was before her. I wasn't just losing a relationship, I was losing the person I thought I was. I knew the first thing I had to do was cut off all ties with her, not just emotionally, but physically. I began going through the house, sorting through the things she had left behind. I took down the photos we had hanging on the walls, removed the framed pictures from the shelves. It wasn't that I wanted to forget her, but I needed to start fresh. I needed space to rebuild, to find my footing again without her presence lingering in every corner of the house. I boxed up her things, her clothes, her jewelry, the little trinkets she had collected over the years. It felt strange, packing away parts of her life, parts of our life, into cardboard boxes. But I knew it was necessary. As I stacked the boxes in the guest room, my mind wandered. I thought about the times we had spent together, the early days when everything had felt so easy, when we had so many plans, so many dreams. I thought about the house we had bought together, the vacations we had taken, the way we used to laugh about the silly things in life. It all seemed so distant now, like another lifetime. There was a sadness that came with those memories, but also a sense of relief. I had been living in a fog for so long, trapped in a relationship that had slowly eroded, and I had been too afraid to face it. But now that it was over, I was starting to see things more clearly. Elena's betrayal had been the catalyst for this shift, but it wasn't just her actions that had changed me. It was the realization that I had been neglecting my own needs, my own desires, in favor of keeping up a facade of a perfect relationship. I had been trying so hard to please her, to make everything look perfect on the outside, that I had forgotten what made me happy, what made me feel alive. I had always prided myself on being a logical person. I was an analyst by trade, and I had always believed that if I could just break things down, I could make sense of them. But the truth was, love wasn't something you could analyze away. The emotions I had for Elena were complex, tangled up in years of shared experiences, and no amount of logic could make them disappear overnight. But what I could do, what I had to do, was let go of the past and start making decisions for myself. Not based on what I thought I should do for her, but on what was best for me. It wasn't easy. There were moments when I missed her more than I cared to admit. I missed the way she used to look at me, the way we could spend hours talking about nothing and everything. But in those moments, I reminded myself of the bigger picture. I wasn't just losing a woman I had loved. I was gaining a new version of myself, a version that was free from the lies and the betrayal, a version that was capable of standing on his own 2 feet again. It wasn't just about the material things. It wasn't about the photos on the walls or the jewelry in the box. It was about the emotional and mental space I was carving out for myself. I realized that in the years we had been together, I had given her too much power over my life, my thoughts, my happiness. I had let her dictate how I viewed the world, how I saw myself. But now I was taking that power back. It was a slow process, but each day I felt a little stronger, a little more like myself again. I spent the next few weeks making small changes. I threw out the things I didn't need, old clothes, broken furniture, anything that reminded me of her. I started going to the gym again, something I hadn't done in months. I took up new hobbies, joined a book club, reconnected with old friends. It wasn't about distracting myself. It was about finding joy in the little things again. I realized that I didn't need Elena to feel complete. I was enough on my own. Work became my anchor during this time. I threw myself into my projects, focusing on building something meaningful, something that was completely mine. I began to think about the future again, something I hadn't allowed myself to do while I was with her. I had stopped dreaming, stopped thinking about what I wanted out of life, because I had been so consumed with what she wanted. But now, I was reclaiming my own aspirations, my own goals. I was rediscovering who I was and what I wanted for myself. There were still moments of doubt, still moments when I questioned if I had done the right thing by ending things with Elena. But those moments were fleeting. The more time passed, the more confident I became in my decision. The more I started to see the pieces of my life come back together, the more I realized that I was better off without her. It was in the quiet moments, when I was alone in my apartment, that I truly began to feel at peace. I could breathe without the weight of her presence looming over me. I could think clearly without the noise of her lies clouding my judgment. I was free, and in that freedom, I was starting to find happiness again. The days following the events at the Amberleaf Hotel and the quiet confrontation with Elena felt like a blur. Tyler had done something he never imagined he would. He had walked away from the life he thought was solid, secure, and built on love. But now, sitting in his new apartment with a glass of whiskey in hand, Tyler knew something deeper had begun, something he couldn't quite name yet, but it was real. He had removed himself from the life he and Elena had built, brick by brick, in a quiet suburban town. The townhouse that once felt like home now seemed like a distant memory. He couldn't escape the weight of the past, but he could build something from it. Every morning he went for long walks, trying to clear his head, trying to absorb the reality that Elena wasn't coming back, not because of an angry outburst or a screaming match, but because something had quietly, deeply broken between them, a trust that, once fractured, couldn't be repaired. Tyler had always been an analyst. He saw patterns, numbers, and systems. But this was different. He wasn't analyzing spreadsheets or investment portfolios now. He was trying to decode his own heart. His future had always seemed clear. Elena, the ring, the house, the kids. But now he couldn't even imagine what the next chapter would be. One night, as he sat at his kitchen table staring at his phone, the email from her father, Thomas Moore, echoed in his mind. "Let me know where we can meet." Tyler hadn't responded immediately, unsure of what kind of conversation they could have now. Thomas had been someone he respected, his business partner, the man who had introduced him to the world of high-profile investments and who, in many ways, had acted like a second father. But now, all of that felt tainted by the way his daughter had treated Tyler. Still, he couldn't help but feel a pull. Maybe it was the desire for closure, or maybe it was the fact that he had lost more than just a fiancée. He had risked the career he had worked so hard to build. Elena's betrayal was not just personal, it was professional too. But Tyler wasn't ready to deal with the mess of it all. Not yet. He took another sip of his whiskey, feeling the burn slide down his throat, and his thoughts drifted back to Hannah Moore, the younger sister who had, in a way, become his unexpected confidant in the midst of all this turmoil. Hannah had shown him something that he hadn't seen in years, a sense of normalcy, a breath of fresh air. They had spent the past few months working together on a few projects for Reeves Ethical Capital, the firm he had launched in the wake of his breakup with Elena, and somewhere between the late-night strategy sessions and the long walks through Denver, something had shifted between him and Hannah. He couldn't exactly label it yet. Was it hope? Attraction? Maybe it was just the warmth of having someone who understood without needing to fix anything. The following afternoon, as Tyler made his way to the office, the weight of the last few weeks seemed to ease just a little. The building that housed his firm now felt like a sanctuary, a place where he could pour his energy into something meaningful. He had established a foundation, a place where ethical investments were the focus, and transparency was key. There was no rush for recognition, no need for the flashy headlines that defined the world he once inhabited. This was his path, and it was slow, methodical, but it was his. As he entered the office, his assistant Maria handed him a letter. It was from Thomas Moore. "I've read everything you've sent. Let's meet tomorrow," the letter read. "We need to discuss how we handle Elena's involvement." Tyler sat down at his desk, the weight of the letter sinking in. He had known it was coming, but now, reading it in black and white, made it real. He wasn't just walking away from a relationship, he was potentially walking away from the man who had been his mentor. He could hear the words Thomas had spoken to him months ago before all this had unraveled. "You've got this, son. Don't let anything stop you." Tyler's mind raced. He knew the next step would be crucial. As he prepared for the meeting with Thomas, he couldn't help but think about the email from Elena. The one where she apologized, but it was too little, too late. It wasn't enough to undo what had been done. The following day, Tyler walked into Thomas Moore's office with a sense of calm he didn't know he possessed. The office was sleek, with expansive windows overlooking the city. Thomas was waiting for him, his suit sharp, his demeanor businesslike. "Tyler, I've heard a lot about you," Thomas said, standing up and offering his hand. "And I've seen what you've been building. Impressive." Tyler shook his hand, but his thoughts were elsewhere. They discussed the business, the projects Tyler had started, and the potential for new investments. But all the while, Tyler's mind kept drifting back to the past. His relationship with Elena, the betrayal, the way it had all spiraled out of control. Every word Thomas said about business felt detached from the real pain Tyler was feeling. There was no way to separate the two worlds, his business life and the emotional wreckage left by Elena's actions. Finally, Thomas looked at him, his eyes sharp. "I know this isn't just about business. You and Elena, it's personal." Tyler nodded, his voice steady. "It was personal from the start, but I've moved on. I'm focused on the future now." There was a long pause before Thomas spoke again. "You're going to need more than that to get through this, Tyler. Trust me." Tyler didn't know how to respond to that. He wasn't sure if Thomas was offering sympathy or a warning. But in that moment, he realized something. He had already moved on. The pieces were in motion. He had created something new, something that couldn't be destroyed by the past. Reeves Ethical Capital was his future now, and it was something he could control. The days following the meeting with Thomas Moore felt strangely liberating for Tyler. The conversation with Thomas had been less about the past and more about where they could go in the future, both professionally and personally. Tyler had made his decision. He was no longer a man chained to a past filled with doubts, betrayals, and unspoken fears. He had stepped forward into something new, something with purpose. It wasn't easy, though. As he walked through the halls of his office, passing the clean white walls of the newly renovated space, he could feel the weight of it all. But it was a different kind of weight, the kind you carry when you've made a choice to shape your own destiny. Tyler didn't have the luxury of running away from the past. Instead, he had chosen to face it head-on and use it as a foundation for something better. It was a few weeks after the meeting with Thomas that Tyler found himself back in Denver, sitting across from Hannah at a quiet cafe. They had been in touch more frequently lately, working together to expand the ethical investment firm, and Tyler couldn't deny the shift in their relationship. What started as professional admiration had evolved into something deeper, something steady. She had been his rock when everything else seemed like it was falling apart. Hannah was, in many ways, everything Elena had not been during their last years together. She was grounded, transparent, and unafraid to challenge him when he fell into old habits. She didn't need to impress him or play any games. It was refreshing. She was real, and it wasn't long before Tyler realized that the weight he had been carrying, the loneliness, the uncertainty, the remnants of a broken trust, had started to lift. "Tyler," Hannah said, her voice steady as she looked over the report he had been working on, "you're doing something big. I can feel it. But are you sure you're ready to take the next step? I mean, really ready?" Her question was blunt, but it hit him harder than he expected. For the first time in a long time, Tyler felt unsure. The success of Reeves Ethical Capital had been a long time coming, and with every new client, every new partnership, the pressure to keep it together grew. But as much as he had put into building this business, Tyler knew that there was still one thing missing: true peace. He had peace in his work, but not in his heart. Not yet. "I don't know if I'll ever feel fully ready," Tyler replied, his gaze steady on her. "But I'm here. I'm here now, and that's what matters." Hannah studied him for a moment, her eyes softening. "You've come a long way, Tyler. But don't forget to enjoy it. Enjoy the moments that matter, because they're the ones that make everything else worth it." He nodded, the weight of her words sinking in the midst of the hustle, the stress of building a business from scratch, and the drama of his personal life. He had forgotten what it meant to simply be. He had been running for so long, chasing the next big opportunity, the next big win, without realizing that the victories in life weren't always measured by numbers or milestones. They were found in the quiet moments, the conversations over coffee, the time spent with people who truly mattered, the moments of peace you allow yourself to have. After their meeting, Tyler took a walk through downtown Denver, the crisp fall air cutting through him as he thought about everything that had happened over the past several months. The hotel, the betrayal, the confrontation with Elena, it all seemed like a distant memory now. He had carved out a new path for himself, and though it wasn't always easy, it was his, and it felt right. That night, as he walked back to his apartment, Tyler looked out at the skyline of the city he had come to love. It was full of promise, of possibilities, and as he stood there, he realized something important. He wasn't running from his past anymore. He had built something new, something worthy of his time and energy. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step in rebuilding not just his career, but his life. He walked inside, greeted by the quiet hum of the apartment. Everything felt at peace, as if the world had finally caught up with him. His phone buzzed on the counter, another email, another project. But this time, Tyler didn't rush to check it. Instead, he took a deep breath, settling into the moment. The next day, he had a meeting scheduled with a potential new investor, and things were progressing steadily. But as he sat down with his morning coffee, Tyler took a moment to reflect. He had no idea where this new chapter would take him, but for the first time in a long time, he felt ready for it. He wasn't just starting a new business or building a new future. He was learning how to trust again, how to embrace the uncertainty, and most importantly, how to live with it. As Tyler closed his laptop and got ready to leave for the meeting, he thought about his conversation with Hannah. She had been right. Sometimes the biggest change came not from chasing after success, but from realizing that you were already enough. That you were worth the effort, not just in business, but in life. And with that thought, Tyler stepped out into the world, knowing that whatever came next, he would face it head on, with the steady determination he had found within himself. Tyler's life had always been driven by logic, by numbers, and by strategy. But now it was driven by something else, something far more personal. The rhythm of the city, the quiet hum of the morning, the interactions with people who hadn't yet forgotten who he was, they all became part of his new reality. The past was no longer an anchor. The decisions he had made, the steps he had taken, had put him in a place where he could see his future not as a continuation of what he had lost, but as something that could be rebuilt and redefined. In the weeks that followed, Tyler's focus shifted. He still ran his business with a level of precision that had always defined him, but now there was a deeper layer to it. His work was no longer just about profit margins and returns. It was about building something meaningful, something that could stand the test of time. Reeves' ethical capital wasn't just about making money. It was about making a difference. He had learned the hard way that sometimes what you build with your hands is far less important than what you build with your heart. It was on one particularly crisp morning in December when Tyler received an unexpected call. His assistant, Maria, had scheduled a meeting with a prospective client, a tech startup founder from Chicago, who had shown interest in his firm's ethical investment approach. Tyler wasn't one to waste time on introductions, but something about this one felt different. It felt like an opportunity to extend his philosophy into the next frontier, sustainable tech. As he prepared for the meeting, Tyler reflected on his own personal growth. He had made peace with the fact that he wasn't just moving on from his past, he was evolving. And while he still carried the lessons from his failed engagement with Elena, they no longer haunted him. They didn't define him. They simply taught him how to be better, not just in business, but as a person. And most importantly, they had shown him that sometimes the greatest success comes from the smallest changes, the moments where you decide to take a different path. The meeting with the tech founder, Marco, went better than expected. Marco was energetic, driven, and deeply passionate about his company's mission to create renewable energy solutions that could be implemented in homes across the U.S. He was exactly the type of entrepreneur Tyler had been hoping for, someone who understood the importance of sustainable business practices and shared his vision for a future where ethical investments weren't just a niche, but the standard. Tyler, Marco said after an hour of discussing potential collaboration, I don't just want money. I want you. I want the integrity you bring to the table. I want a partner who's as committed to ethical business as I am. Tyler smiled, feeling something in his chest tighten. He wasn't just being recognized for his financial acumen. He was being valued for his principles, for the very thing that had become the cornerstone of his firm. This wasn't just a business deal. It was a reflection of everything he had worked for in the last year. He was no longer defined by his mistakes. He was defined by his actions moving forward. As he drove home that evening, the glow of the city lights reflecting off his rearview mirror, Tyler thought about the strange but beautiful journey he had been on. A year ago, he was lost in betrayal, confusion, and a future he never saw coming. But now, as he stood at the precipice of something new, he felt a sense of calm he hadn't known he was capable of. At home, Tyler walked through the door to find the warmth of his apartment embracing him. The familiar scent of fresh coffee filled the air. As he entered the living room, he was greeted by the quiet hum of a life he was beginning to build again. He had become a different man, one who knew how to trust, not because of what others had done for him, but because of what he had done for himself. That night, as he sat down at his kitchen table to enjoy a simple meal, Tyler thought about Hannah. The relationship they shared had not been rushed, nor had it been forced. It was slow, steady, and full of promise. He had learned not to look for answers in anyone else's expectations, but his own. Hannah had become a fixture in his life, not because she was a solution to his pain, but because she had shown him how to build something from the ground up. She wasn't the woman who healed his wounds. She was the woman who taught him how to live with them, how to live with himself. And that, Tyler realized, was the most important lesson of all. Tyler picked up his phone and sent her a message. I'm proud of what we're building. Proud of what you're building. Thank you for being a part of it. The reply came almost immediately. And thank you for showing me how to build things that matter. Let's keep building together. Tyler leaned back in his chair, feeling the weight of the words sink in. This was it. This was the life he had wanted, the life he was building, not with the past, but from the future. A life filled with integrity, honesty, and a quiet strength that came from knowing exactly who he was,